Good morning. It's great to be here this morning. I do apologize just off the top for a little bit of my voice. You know, the great thing about having kids is that you send them to school and then they come back and give you sickness. And it's a perpetual circle. You send them back, they give you more. So my voice has just not gotten better, and so I have this coffee cup that actually has water in it, and I have it for two reasons: to be able to keep my voice okay, and to show you that over the holidays, my brother-in-law got me this. It says, "Be careful, or you will end up in my sermon." And I was like, that's pretty good. I was like, I'm going to need to tell my teens that, and my family knows that, because I like to tell stories. And they usually include people I know. So be careful. It's good to be here this morning, though. If you're visiting with us this morning, we really appreciate having you. If you don't know me, I am not the normal minister who preaches every Sunday. I am the youth minister here at this congregation, and it's a blessing to have the opportunity to speak. Get to do this every once in a while. And I hope today that continuing what Len has been sharing will be beneficial to you, will be edifying to you. He told me, I knew we were talking about the foundation. We were talking about what it means to have a firm foundation in our Christian walk. And he asked me, well, what would you like to talk about in that vein? And so there were several different options. And one of those options was the church, the foundation of the church. And as soon as those words were uttered, it really resonated with me, because the church has been a really interesting part of my life, of my story. So today, I want to just preface my comments by saying that in the next few slides, it might sound like I'm being overly negative. And I just ask you to bear with me, just as I talk a little bit about me, and trust that I can get to the point where I believe that the church truly is the foundation. So I'm going to give it away a little bit, that I promise you there's a good ending here. But let me tell you a little bit about me. I grew up with my family not knowing church, or at least in their life they didn't know church. They came to be baptized when they were married, and they had 5 kids. And they decided that the thing that they wanted to do different is they wanted to bring them to church. But I didn't have grandparents, great-grandparents. I didn't have a family that grew up in the church. And in fact, I had uncles and aunts and a lot of different family members who spent time in prison, who lived a life that was very much of this world. Mental health has been a huge part of my family legacy. I'm sure we all have family members that you could relate to, right? That was my background. So mom and dad come into this church, and they come into this Church of Christ, and they're welcomed and loved, and everything's going well at first. Well, I come along, and I get to about 10 or 11 years old, and I'm given the opportunity to get up here on a Wednesday night because they believed in having the teens learn how to preach. And somehow they saw it fit that would be a great idea, to have all these teens come up and be the main keynote speaker. And let's just say that I was long-winded. It was ordained. I wasn't afraid of speaking. And because of that, I started realizing, people were like, oh, you did a really good job, 11 years old. I was probably terrible. But, I didn't go 2 minutes like everybody else did. I went several minutes, and I was able to hold my composure. And I found this niche that I really liked. And I found this identity marker that I really liked. And so I wanted to be in ministry. Well, I grew up in a different kind of church. And you can ask me about that later. I don't want to get into the nuts and bolts of that. But in this church, being an evangelist was tantamount to being a preacher. We didn't really have a preacher. And so being an evangelist that traveled around was sort of what it is to be a minister. And I wanted that. That sounded so neat to me. I was the only kid I knew that wanted that. Well, outside of a few kids that were in the churches with me, because we associated with some other churches, right? And I got a lot of opportunities. But as I got a little bit older, I started realizing I had some limitations. My last name, if you know me, and my last name is Conrad. Well, the last name that was accepted in that congregation was not Conrad. Because we were one family, and we were a family that had only been there for 15 years, maybe, at that point. And there are families that had been there for generations. And they had most of the congregation. And then they had other family members at other congregations. So I didn't have the right last name. And I was getting in the way of getting opportunities that other people should have been getting, according to them. So I learned the funny word of politics at age 15 years old. It sucks. Didn't know what that meant, but I learned it pretty quickly. I learned that I started being hurt by this process. And this last year, if you've been a part of our congregation, you know that we just went to Nicaragua, right? We worked really hard to go to Nicaragua. I was so proud of how many teens went to Nicaragua. If a teen came up to me and said, I want to go to Nicaragua, I would have done everything I could to be able to make sure you could go. I think everybody in this congregation would have made sure one of our teens could go. Growing up, we used to go to Nigeria. They used to go to India and Nigeria. And at one point, I was 15, and some of the other teens were going. And I was like, hey, I want to go. I want to go to Nigeria. That sounds so neat. And I remember the conversation like it was yesterday. They looked at me and said, we ask you, you don't ask us. I never went to Nigeria. I never went to India. In fact, the first time I have been out of the U.S. legally, inside joke, ask me later, it was Nicaragua. So Nicaragua will always hold a special place in my heart because that's something I didn't get to do as a teen, because I was excluded, because I wasn't good enough. I came from the wrong family. The church really hurt me, and then finally, after many other things that happened, which I don't have time to talk about, I decided at 17 years old, playing high school baseball, and decided, I was not great, but I was at least in shape, and I worked really hard, and I loved baseball, and I loved sports, and it was my out. I decided, you know what? Who needs church? I can't serve a God that allows these people to be like that. So I left. I made some really poor choices and lived a life in the world for a few years before finally finding my way back, which I will talk about in a little bit. So I ask this question rhetorically, that for people like me, at least at that age, is the church relevant? Because it is filled with politics. It is filled with hypocrisy. It is filled with cliques. It can be exclusive. It's meant to reflect Jesus, but man, it often feels broken. Have you been there? Have you felt that before? Yes, sir. It's a shame that it feels that way. Though it's not really new. We look in Corinth, and in fact, the other day, we're starting a series on Wednesday night with the teens. We're talking about 1 Corinthians. And so we introduced it the other night about unity in the church and about this idea of the cliques going on. And some of the problems in 1 Corinthians chapter 1 is that, Paul starts it off by saying, I've heard from Chloe's household, which, we gave Chloe a hard time. What is she doing over here? No, I'm just sitting. I said, we heard from Chloe's household that there's some problems among you guys. He says, some people are saying, I follow Paul. Of course, Paul's the one talking. Some say, I follow Cephas, which is Peter, or I follow Apollos. He says, is Christ divided? It's funny that that's where he led, because there's so many other problems in that church. There's divisions. A guy sleeping with his mother-in-law. It's not good. People are suing each other. People are sleeping with prostitutes at the temple. We're having food sacrificed to idols. We're misusing the Lord's table because we're excluding other people because they're not good enough to be able to take in the Lord's table. We're having a popularity contest on who can have the best spiritual gifts. We don't believe in the resurrection of the dead because, we can't believe in weakness, and death is, if you haven't checked lately, that's kind of weak. Would you agree it's pretty messed up? It's a messed up church. So the idea of a church being messed up is not even new. It goes all the way back to the beginning. It goes all the way back to when Paul's writing this letter saying, what is going on? Why is this going on? And sadly, guys, it's not new in our broader world. Would you agree that we also follow cliques? Whether you're conservative or liberal, sometimes we say, I follow the conservatives, or I follow the liberals, or I follow Mega Pastor X, or I follow the most righteous person amongst us. You know, if you're not this way, I can't follow you. I hate to say it, but our church has been filled with some sexual scandals of their own. And I say our church in the plural of the idea of the name of Christ, unfortunately, has taken a hit sometimes. We have hypocrisy. We're sometimes insensitive to social issues, and I'm not getting political about that. I'm just saying sometimes we're insensitive, and we don't necessarily show the love of Jesus in the way that we talk. When I say excessive focus on culture wars, I'm not talking about standing up for the truth. I'm talking about doing so in a way that shows the love of Christ. Sometimes we can be judgmental. Sometimes we can act just like the world in the way that we are hateful and angry. We're sometimes irrelevant in our messaging. And sometimes, even in our leadership, we're abusive of our own power. And I say that collectively. Maybe not here right now. And I know that's a temptation to say, well, you know what, Tim? We're a great church, right? And we are. And me and Kelsey are so blessed to be here. This is the greatest congregation we've ever been a part of. But don't grow weary. Because it can happen here too. Because we're human beings that are flawed, and we are prone to that type of stuff. So we can't say or grow complicit and say it can't happen to us. We have to look in the mirror and go, are we doing any of those things? Where are we at? Are we following other people? Is Christ divided? So the question for today is, if the church is supposed to reflect Jesus, why? Why does it seem so broken? And this is where it gets back to where I wanted to preach on today. And in the main passage I have, and if you're a part of our small groups, which, by the way, I'm just going to plug in for our home groups, plug in for our home groups. If you're not a part of a home group, I really encourage you to ask someone about a home group, because we do that every year. It's just such a wonderful time to take the message and be able to, in a small group, sit and talk about this. But one of the things that I have on the home group page is reading about 1 Corinthians 3 and the foundation of what we are built upon. And I think as we talk about this, it's so important to understand, what are we building the foundation upon? And this is where 1 Corinthians 3 comes into play. So let's read 1 Corinthians 3. This is our text this morning, 1 Corinthians 3, and I have on our notes, it's 5 through 17, but I'm just going to start in verse 10. Now, I just want to give you a little bit of a background. Obviously, Paul's talking a lot about a lot of issues in Corinth. But if you just kind of go back to what I said at the very beginning, when he starts off the unity in chapter 1, really, we're still there. We're still talking about unity. And we're in 1 Corinthians 3, chapter 3, verse 10, and here's what Paul says. By the grace God has given me, I laid a foundation as a wise builder, and someone else is building on it. But each one should build with care. For no one can lay any foundation other than the one already laid, which is Jesus Christ. If anyone builds on this foundation using gold, silver, costly stones, wood, hay, or straw, their work will be shown for what it is, because the day will bring it to light. It will be revealed with fire, and the fire will test the quality of each person's work. If what has been built survives, the builder will receive a reward. If it is burned up, the builder will suffer loss, but yet will be saved, even though only as one escaping through the flames. I want to illustrate this verse by, first of all, pointing the most important thing. He says, there's no other foundation laid other than the one that's already been laid. That is Jesus Christ. Now, you might say, well, duh, that's the church. That's what we're supposed to have the foundation upon. And you're right. Except, is that always the case? Unfortunately, sometimes I think that our foundation is built upon personalities. It's built upon celebrity leaders. It's built upon political agendas and social trends. It's built upon programs, even programs. I love programs. We have a lot of great ministries. Let's swap the word programs for ministries. Ministries are great. But would you agree that if a church is built upon ministries and not Jesus Christ, we have a problem? A fragile structure that the result of building upon these things is a fragile structure that does not endure the testing that Paul talks about here in Corinthians. So the question is, what happens when we prioritize leaders or preferences or agendas or even ministries over who our foundation is, and that is Jesus Christ? On Wednesday night, as we were talking about this, again, guys, I remind you, be careful what you say. This might end up in my sermon. As we were talking about this on the teams, we played a game to begin the class. And I had all these cards, and it said we broke off in groups of 3? Was it? Yeah, we broke off into groups of 3. All the teens did. We had a lot of teens on Wednesday night. And we broke off into groups of 3, and I even had the adults play along. And I said, hey, I had different descriptive words, like optimism, team spirit, charisma. Yeah, Anna didn't know what that meant. Charisma. I forget who didn't. Charisma. Sorry, I didn't know that was a hard word. Charisma. We had all these different words, like 20 different words, and we randomly drew them. And it said, pick someone, not in your group, pick someone who you think exemplifies this trait. And so they sat there and they wrote names down. As we started reading through the names with all these different groups, we had about 10 to 11 different cards come up. And I'm telling you, every single card was different. Well, outside of the charisma card, because they didn't understand it. But outside of that card, every other card was different. We had 10 different names. And I did that on purpose. I didn't want to just do leader, because I thought, well, leader's going to box them into one particular idea, and they're going to all say the 2 or 3 different names they think that they should say. I wanted to be creative, and so I had these 10 different names. Now, that's great. By the way, really cool exercise, because we nominated some people who probably would not have been nominated otherwise, and that was just a really neat moment. So there was a really cool positive affirmation, a part of that exercise. But there was also another sinister part of that little exercise, and what I told them, I said, I don't want to make you feel bad about doing what you just did, but I also want to show you something. I want to show you that you just chose your preferences for what you like on this particular category, and you chose 10 different people, right? Now, is that wrong? No, not necessarily. Do we all have preferences? Yes. I like people who are funny. I like listening to speakers who are funny. I like listening to speakers who are a little bit charismatic. I like that kind of thing. But if I decide that is more important than my foundation in Jesus Christ, we have a problem. And if they were to decide that those traits, or whatever that might be, that person that they nominated was more important than their responsibility to be able to be a friend and to unite with our entire group, then we're not going to have a youth group. That's how cliques form. That's how a church becomes divided. When we had decided that we're going to follow other things, other people, other ministries, and not the main foundation, which is Jesus Christ. So I ask you again, where are we at? Where are the preferences? What preferences do we have? What are we building our church upon? What ingredients are we throwing into the fire? Are they going to withstand God testing them? But as we seek a resolution this morning, I don't want to sound overly negative. I know the church gets a lot wrong, and it probably will continue to do so. But I also believe that when it's built upon the actual foundation it was intended to be built upon, that is Jesus Christ, when we actually build upon that foundation with solid ingredients of love and humility, of faith, I believe the church can be a wonderful place. I was 22 years old. I was I was 21. I was going absolutely nowhere in life. I probably would not be alive if I had continued that path, because I had just given up all hope. Just thought my life was nothing. But I hated God and I hated church. I wanted no part of it. And a youth minister, mom and dad, had finally left the church that I grew up with all those years later. And I was mad at them for that too. I'm like, wait, so now you leave? You waited till this? Like, I'm broken, doing my own stuff in the world, not figuring it out, and like I have nothing, and now you leave. And now my brothers and sisters, like me, I'm the oldest, so all my younger siblings, now they have a chance of actually liking this, because all I hear is good things. But I'm not interested. And I'm stuck up and arrogant anyway, and so I'm thinking that they're wrong for leaving, even though that doesn't even make sense because I don't even believe in it. So I remember this youth minister. We didn't have a youth minister growing up, but they had a youth minister at this new church. And this youth minister, by the way, I'm not a youth. I mean, remember, I'm 22 years old, 21, almost 22 years old. Mom and dad had told him, yeah, we have an oldest son. He's working in restaurants. He's making money. He stays out late. He goes to bars. He's lost. Corey Waddell, he says, well, give me his phone number. So he calls me one day. He says, hey man, I met your parents. They seem like really nice people. I'd love to get with you. I was like, yeah, man, I'm not interested. Thanks. Click. Did that about 5 different times. Finally, I don't know, somewhere along the way, I'm thinking, this guy's annoying. I mean, will you just get the message? I really don't care. You're just another guy. I don't have time for you. It's like, fine, whatever. You want to go get coffee? Sure. I'll get coffee with you, and then you're done. So I went and got coffee with him. I'm 35 years old. That was 13 years ago. Corey Waddell, through the grace of God, built on the foundation of Jesus Christ, saved my life. Because he didn't give up on me. He was a friend. He showed me love, compassion, grace, understanding, and believe me, I didn't learn quick. And I was an absolute pain in the butt to deal with. Kelsey will tell you I still am. But he led me down a path that eventually found my way the next year at Harding University, which wasn't easy. But then I met my wife, got a college degree, first in my family, my entire family, first person in my entire family to graduate with a college degree. I have 3 beautiful kids. So yeah, the church can be an amazing place. But it's also filled with sinners like me and you. And I think about Corey a lot because now I'm a youth minister, the irony, right? And the irony is I get busy and I have a family and there's a lot of kids in the youth group. And it's not that I don't care. I care more than these guys would ever know I care. But sometimes I don't have time. And sometimes if I call them once and they hung up on me or they don't want to get with me, I'm thinking, okay. And I think about Corey a lot. I'm like, how did he have the time? That was a church of 800 people. How did he have the time to call me that many times? I would have given up. But God saw fit that Corey didn't give up on me. So I'm telling you today that if Jesus Christ is the foundation, and that's what we truly care about, then we can do amazing things as a church. And it's not because I follow Paul or I follow Peter or I follow Corey or I follow, we were talking about Winterfest and the Men's Day. We're about to have David Skidmore, and I love David Skidmore. I know yesterday someone joked that I'm the president of the fan club. Yeah, sure. I do love David Skidmore, but I don't follow David Skidmore. I follow Jesus Christ. And as long as David Skidmore is preaching Jesus Christ, then I'm pleased to listen to David Skidmore. But the second that he turns away from that, I'm out. Because it's not about David. It's not about me. It's not about Len. It's not about the best preacher you've ever heard in your life. It's about your relationship with God. So I'm asking you today, where are you? Because the church can be a place of belonging. It can be a place of truth. It can be a place of transformation, just as I outlined. It can be a place of true benevolence, where we are able to take care of those who do not have. We don't have to rely on the government. And no, that's not a political statement. That's just saying that we can be a place that provides for people. We can be a place where true justice is shown. We can be a place where we take action against all the inequities of this world. But first, we have to have the foundation down. Because we can't do anything without the foundation. I went to Harding University, and I saw a lot of guys that were my age who were, what am I, a millennial? I think I'm a millennial. What are we, Gen Z now? Is that where we're at? Yeah? Maddox gave me the thumbs up. I'm going to take that as yes. So Gen Z, I hate to tell you guys, but a lot of you guys, and even millennials, will tell me things like, well, you know what? I love Jesus. Jesus is great. Seems like a cool guy. Don't need the church. Kind of hate the church. I'm going to go do my own thing. I'm going to do good in the world. I'm going to follow Jesus. Don't need the church. Have you ever heard that? It's a really popular trend. It's getting more popular because we have the technology. So, you know what? I don't need to be here with you guys. I can go watch online. That's not a knock to our online services. It is a knock, though, if that becomes the only way, if that becomes an excuse for not having community. There's a difference. It's valid to have the technology, but when it becomes an excuse of, I don't want to be around people because they are broken and bad, and I'm going to go and find my joy and find my faith and find my commitment by finding online services, online praise, doing all these things virtually, and going and doing good for Jesus on my own in the world. There's a lot of people who feel that way. Paul says the only foundation for the church is Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ says we are his temple. We are his temple, collectively. That's a we. That's not an I. That's not a you. That's us together. And I'm telling you today that we can go back one more slide. Sorry, go back one before we get there. And one more. Sorry. I want to tell you today, though, that you can't do this without the church. We need each other. We need the community. One last story, and I'll be done for this morning. On Wednesday night, we were talking as a small group for the boys, and we were discussing the whole unity thing. And we were talking about, well, what do we need to do? What do we need to do as a group to become better at being one? Cliques. We all have them. And, there's a lot of ideas being thrown around. And I finally stopped everything. I was like, you know what? Okay, raise your hand. So, by the way, as I was saying this, I'm going to invite the congregation to participate. Okay? This is what I did with the kids. Raise your hand if you have ever been a part of the problem with the church not being as unified as it needs to be. Have you ever been a part of the problem? Most of our boys raised their hand. They said, yeah, I'm part of the problem. Okay. So now what do we need to do about it? That's where it starts. We have to acknowledge our own sin. We have to acknowledge our own culpability, and that sometimes the church is not as good as it needs to be because we haven't been building with it with the right ingredients. We haven't been doing the things that we need to do. And that's where we need to go back and repent and say, all right, God, show me the way that we need to build this church. May your kingdom come. May it be on earth as it is in heaven. And it's going to be a constant struggle and a constant refinement. So I pray today that you reflect upon that you act upon that we get out of the us versus them mentality. And I pray that you pray. That you give it to God, that you actually go to him and say, you know what, God, show us what we need to do. And yeah, this is a great church, and I'm so proud to be a part of this church. But the question we need to ask is, God, show us how we can improve. How can we reach more people in Somerville? What are we doing right now that could use more refinement? What are better ingredients that we could use? How can we build even better upon the foundation that has been laid? And then finally, after all of those things, then we commit to doing it. And that's how we can build upon the firm foundation, right? And that's how we can build upon our faith. And, this morning as I was trying to ask for ideas for class, as we're changing up a few things to the teen class, I was asking the teens, I said, hey, if you have any ideas for how we can improve, please let me know. And one way I phrased it is I said, think of it this way. What needs to change? Because they went quiet all of a sudden. I said, I must be the perfect preacher then. I was like, if nothing's wrong. And so, they laughed. And I said, here's what I need. I said, I need you to think through this. What barriers are in this class right now that would prevent you from asking your friend to come? That's what I'm asking you today. What barriers are a part of your life or a part of our congregation as a whole that we need to address, that you need to address, that you would be proud and excited to invite your neighbor, to invite your friend, to invite the clerk at the grocery store and say, hey, come on down, it's great. This morning, I hope and pray that you have the peace of being a part of God's family, of having been a part of a church that truly is built upon the foundation. I do believe that we are built upon the foundation of Jesus Christ. And I do believe that we have wonderful people here that are putting excellent faith and hope and love and all the things that I didn't see as a child. I love that I get to see that here, and I love that my kids get to see that. Glory to God. And if that's not something that has been a part of your life, then that's something you can come and fix today. We invite you to consider joining our family. We believe as a congregation that joining our family takes the step of being baptized into Christ. If you would like to know more about that, then please talk to myself, talk to Len, talk to our elders, talk to somebody about what it means for you to put on the faith of Christ. Or maybe this morning, you're like me, you've been part of the problem. That it's not just that you've been hurt, but that you've also been a sinner who hasn't necessarily contributed to the church the way that we are called to be. If that's something that you need the prayers of the church, then we also welcome you to do so as we stand and sing the song that's been selected.